Before going to bed, I overheard a strange conversation between my daughter-in-law and my son. After Thanksgiving, he goes straight to the nursing home. I kicked the door open and shouted, "Before you go, I'll show you a special film." And when I pressed play on the TV, my daughter-in-law fainted. It was the night before Thanksgiving, and I was shuffling down the hallway in my slippers, heading to the kitchen for my evening glass of warm milk. The routine had become sacred to me since Martha died. She used to make it for me every night, adding just a touch of honey the way I liked it. Now I made it myself, a small ritual that kept her memory alive. The house was quiet, except for the soft murmur of voices coming from the living room. My son, Leonard, and his wife Ava were having what sounded like a serious conversation. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but their voices carried down the hallway, and something in Ava's tone made me pause. After Thanksgiving, he goes straight to the facility. She was saying, her voice cold and matter-of-fact, "I've already spoken to Sunset Manor. They have an opening next week." My blood turned to ice. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering so hard I was sure they could hear it from the other room. "Are you sure about this timing?" Leonard's voice was hesitant, but not disagreeing, just concerned about logistics. What if he asks questions? Ava let out a sharp laugh that had no warmth in it. "What's he going to do, Leonard? He's completely dependent on us. Besides, we've been patient long enough. Your father takes up the entire guest room, and I'm tired of walking on eggshells around him. This house is too small for 3 adults, but he helped us with the down payment," Leonard said, though his voice lacked conviction. $25,000, Ava. That was his life savings. "And we're grateful," she replied smoothly. "That's exactly why we're not just abandoning him on the street." Sunset Manor is a nice place. Clean professional staff. He'll be better off there. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it stopped beating. $25,000. My life savings. The money I'd scraped out from 43 years of working at the steel mill. The money Martha and I had set aside for our retirement, for emergencies, for our family's future. I had given it to them willingly when they said they were struggling to buy this house. "What about the rest of his money?" Leonard asked. "His pension, his Social Security, power of attorney. Remember?" Ava's voice was practically purring now. "Once he's in the facility and we can prove he needs full-time care, we can manage all his finances. The pension alone is $1,800 a month, plus his Social Security. That's almost $3,000 monthly we can use to pay for this house." The walls seemed to be closing in around me. I had to grip the door frame to keep from falling. These people, my son and his wife, weren't just planning to abandon me. They were planning to steal from me. They were planning to warehouse me in some facility and take control of every penny I had. "I just feel bad about it sometimes," Leonard mumbled. "Don't," Ava snapped. "Your father had his life. He raised you. He had his marriage. He had his career. Now it's our turn. We're young, Leonard. We deserve to enjoy our lives without some old man shuffling around, leaving his pills everywhere, and monopolizing the bathroom for an hour every morning." old man. That's what I was to them. Not Leonard's father. Not the man who had worked double shifts to pay for his college education. Not the man who had walked him to his first day of school because he was too scared to go alone. Just some old man taking up space. I stood there in that hallway, in my pajamas and worn slippers, feeling smaller than I had ever felt in my entire life. The betrayal wasn't just Leonard's words or Ava's coldness. It was the realization that I had been living a lie for the past 2 years. Every smile, every "How was your day, Dad?" every "We're so glad you're here with us" had been a performance. "The papers are already signed," Ava continued. "I told them he has early-stage dementia and can't make decisions for himself anymore." "But he doesn't have dementia," Leonard protested weakly. "Who's going to know he's old? He's grieving, he's confused. The staff at Sunset Manor deals with families like ours all the time, adult children who can't handle the burden anymore." Burden. The word hit me like a physical blow. I thought about all the ways I'd tried to make myself useful since moving in with them. I cooked dinner 3 nights a week. I kept the yard immaculate. I paid for groceries every other week with my pension money. I babied their temperamental old furnace and fixed every leaky faucet and squeaky door in this house. I thought I was contributing. I thought I was earning my place. But to Ava, I was just a burden. "When do we tell him?" Leonard asked. "We don't," Ava said firmly. "We wake up Monday morning, pack his things, and drive him there. Clean break. No drama, no arguments, no guilt trips. By Monday night, this house will be ours again." I couldn't listen anymore. My legs felt like they were going to give out, and I needed to get back to my room before they heard me. I crept down the hallway, each step feeling like I was walking through quicksand. Once inside my room, I closed the door as quietly as I could and sat heavily on the edge of my bed. The room suddenly looked different to me. This wasn't my room. I realized this was their guest room. I was just a temporary occupant, and my time was up. I looked around at my belongings, Martha's photograph on the nightstand, my clothes hanging in half the closet, my medications lined up on the dresser. 2 years of trying to build a new life, and it was all about to be packed up and shipped off to Sunset Manor. But as I sat there in the darkness, something else began to grow alongside the hurt and betrayal. It started as a tiny spark of anger, and it grew hotter with each passing minute. They thought I was helpless. They thought I was just some confused old man who would go along with whatever they decided. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I hadn't survived 43 years in a steel mill by being passive. I hadn't raised Leonard as a single father after his mother died by giving up when things got tough. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let some manipulative woman and my weak-willed son steal my life and my dignity without a fight. Leonard and Ava had made one crucial mistake. They assumed I was defenseless. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving, and they had no idea what kind of feast I was about to serve them. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Ava's voice saying, "Burden, an old man." By 5 in the morning, I gave up trying to sleep and sat in my chair by the window, watching the sun come up over the neighborhood I had helped them move into. This house, this beautiful two-story colonial, with the wraparound porch and mature oak trees, existed because of me. Not just the $25,000 down payment, though that had been everything Martha and I had saved. I'd also spent countless weekends here over the past 2 years, fixing, improving, maintaining. I'd replaced the entire plumbing in the upstairs bathroom. I'd rewired the kitchen when the old electrical work started throwing sparks. I'd painted every room except their master bedroom. I'd poured my blood, sweat, and savings into making this house a home for my family. And they were planning to throw me away like yesterday's newspaper. As I sat there remembering, the anger that had started last night began to crystallize into something harder, more focused. I started thinking about Leonard when he was growing up and how different things had been then. His mother died when he was 16. Cancer, just like Martha. I was 34 years old working at the mill and suddenly trying to raise a grieving teenager by myself. I could have remarried. God knows there were women interested, but Leonard was so broken by losing his mother that I couldn't bear the thought of bringing someone new into our lives who might not understand what he was going through. So I focused everything on him. I worked extra shifts to pay for his college. I drove 6 hours each way every weekend during his freshman year because he was homesick and struggling. I paid for his wedding to Ava, a $15,000 celebration that nearly wiped out what little savings I had left after his education. I remembered that wedding day clearly now. Ava had insisted on an expensive venue, expensive flowers, expensive everything. Leonard had come to me embarrassed but desperate, asking if I could help. "Just until we get on our feet, Dad," he'd said. "Ava's family expects a certain kind of wedding." Even then, I should have seen the warning signs. Ava's family expected, but they weren't paying. It was always someone else's responsibility to fund Ava's expectations. But I'd said yes because I loved my son and I wanted him to be happy. I liquidated the small investment account Martha and I had built up, and I handed Leonard a check for $15,000. I told myself it was worth it to see him smile on his wedding day. Now I understood the truth. I hadn't been buying Leonard's happiness. I'd been buying Ava's temporary approval. And the clock had been ticking ever since. I thought about the past 2 years living in this house with them. All the little moments that I'd interpreted as love and care, I now saw with different eyes. When Ava insisted I join them for dinner every night, I'd thought she was being inclusive. Now I realized she was keeping tabs on me, making sure I wasn't getting too independent or making outside friends. When Leonard suggested I move in with them, instead of staying in the apartment Martha and I had shared, I thought he was being thoughtful. Now I understood. He was getting me away from neighbors who knew me, away from my routine, away from my independence. When they encouraged me to put their names on my bank account just for emergencies, I thought they were helping me plan for the future. Now I knew they were planning to rob me. The worst part was realizing how they'd isolated me. Back in my old apartment, I'd had Mrs. Rodriguez next door who checked on me every day. I'd had coffee every Tuesday with my old work buddy, Frank. I'd had my routines, my independence, my dignity. Here, I had nothing. except what they allowed me to have. But they'd made a mistake. They thought 2 years of manipulation had made me helpless, but they'd forgotten something important about me. I might be 67, but I wasn't some doddering fool. I'd managed a crew of 30 men at the steel mill for over 20 years. I'd negotiated with union representatives and plant managers. I'd solved problems, handled crises, and made decisions that affected people's livelihoods. Those skills didn't disappear just because I'd retired. I got dressed quietly and made my way downstairs. Leonard and Ava were still sleeping, which gave me time to think and plan. I made my coffee and sat at the kitchen table with a notepad just like I used to do when I was working through a problem at the mill. First, I needed information. I walked to Leonard's home office where he kept all the household files. I'd helped him organize this filing system when they first moved in, so I knew where everything was. I found the folder labeled Dad's Documents and felt my stomach drop. Inside were papers I had never seen before. Power of attorney documents with my signature, but I didn't remember signing them. Medical assessments claiming I had early-stage dementia, signed by a doctor I'd never met. And worst of all, admission papers for Sunset Manor with my information filled out and a deposit already paid. My hands were shaking as I read through everything. They hadn't just been planning this for a few weeks. They'd been setting this up for months, maybe longer. Every time Ava had suggested I see a new doctor for my memory issues, she'd been building a paper trail to support their lies. I photographed every document with my phone. Martha had given me this smartphone for my 65th birthday, and she'd taught me how to use the camera. You never know when you might need evidence of something, Eddie, she'd said with a laugh. If only she'd known how right she was. Next, I checked their financial documents. Leonard had always been careless about leaving papers out, and I found their bank statements in a stack on his desk. What I saw made my blood boil. They'd been spending my down payment money on luxury purchases. A $5,000 weekend getaway to Napa Valley last month. Ava's new car, a BMW, that cost more than I'd made in 6 months at the mill. Leonard's golf club membership, which ran $800 a month. They'd taken my life savings and used it to fund a lifestyle they couldn't afford. And now they plan to take my pension and Social Security to keep the party going. I photographed those documents too. But the real discovery came when I found Ava's personal phone, which she'd left charging on the kitchen counter. I knew her passcode because I'd watched her enter it dozens of times. It was Leonard's birthday. Her text messages told the whole story. Conversations with her sister about how Leonard's dad is finally going into a home and how they'd finally have some privacy. Messages with someone named Rick that made my skin crawl, talking about their special friendship and how she'd be free to travel once I was out of the picture. Chum. And most damning of all, a conversation with someone at Sunset Manor discussing my behavioral issues and aggressive tendencies that would justify keeping me sedated and isolated. They weren't just planning to steal from me, they were planning to drug me into compliance. I saved screenshots of everything and sent them to my own phone. Then I deleted the evidence of my snooping from her phone. As I sat there in their kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of their betrayal, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose-focused, the same feeling I used to get at the mill when a crisis hit, and everyone looked to me for solutions. Leonard and Ava thought they were dealing with a confused, helpless old man. They were about to learn that they'd picked a fight with the wrong person. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving, and I was going to give them a meal they'd never forget. Time has a way of becoming fluid when you're focused on a mission. The rest of that day passed in a blur of planning and preparation. I returned all the documents to their proper places, making sure nothing looked disturbed. Then I called Frank, my old friend from the mill. We hadn't spoken in months, not since Ava had convinced me I was too busy to meet him for our regular coffee. Frank answered on the second ring, his gruff voice familiar and comforting. "Frank, it's Edward. I need some advice." I didn't tell him everything, just enough. That I was concerned about my living situation, that I felt Leonard and Ava might be taking advantage of me, that I needed to know my rights. Frank had always been smart about these things. His wife had been an administrative assistant at a law firm before she retired, and he'd picked up a lot of legal knowledge from her. "Eddie, you still own part of that house, right?" Frank's question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" I asked. "When they bought the place, you went to the closing, signed some papers. Don't you remember?" The memory came back in a rush. Leonard had asked me to come to the closing because the bank wanted to verify the source of the down payment. I'd signed several documents, but I hadn't paid much attention to what they were. I was still deep in grief over Martha at the time. "Call the title company," Frank advised. "Get a copy of the deed. If your name is on it, that house is partly yours, no matter what they say." I promised I would, and thanked him for the advice. Just as I was about to hang up, Frank added one more thing. "And Eddie, if things go south, you've always got a place with me. Since Helen died, this house is too big for just one person anyway." His offer brought tears to my eyes. Frank and I had worked side by side for nearly 3 decades, but I hadn't realized how much our friendship meant to him, or how much I had missed it. I thanked him again and promised to call him back once I knew more. Next, I called the title company that had handled the closing. The woman who answered was friendly and efficient. Yes, she could email me a copy of the deed right away. I gave her my email address and waited. 10 minutes later, I was staring at the document on my phone. My name clearly listed as owning 37% of the property. I hadn't remembered this at all, but there it was in black and white. When I'd contributed that $25,000 down payment, the attorney had drawn up the paperwork to make me a partial owner proportional to my contribution. I felt a rush of relief so intense it made me dizzy. I wasn't just a guest in this house. I was an owner. They couldn't throw me out without my consent. They couldn't sell without my signature. I had leverage I hadn't even known about. But I needed more than just the deed. I needed a plan. I spent the afternoon researching elder law on my phone, looking up resources on financial abuse of seniors, and reading about power of attorney documents. I learned that if they had forged my signature or tricked me into signing something I didn't understand, those documents might not be legally binding. I found the number for the Adult Protective Services in our county and saved it to my contacts. I wouldn't call yet. I wanted to gather more evidence first, but it was comforting to know there were agencies designed to help people in my situation. That evening, I cooked dinner as usual, smiling at Ava and Leonard as if nothing had changed. Inside, I felt like a spy in enemy territory, watching their every move with new awareness. Ava's constant checking of her phone, Leonard's inability to meet my eyes, the way they exchanged glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Had they always been this obvious, or was I just seeing clearly for the first time? After dinner, I excused myself early, claiming I was tired. In my room, I set up the small digital recorder Martha had given me years ago for recording bird calls, one of her many hobbies. I placed it behind some books on the shelf in the living room where Leonard and Ava often talked in the evenings. Then I retreated to my room and pretended to sleep. Around 11 p.m., I heard them go into the living room. I slipped out of bed and stood by my door listening. When I was sure they were settled, I crept down the hallway to retrieve the recorder. Back in my room, I plugged in my earbuds and listened. Most of their conversation was mundane complaints about work gossip about friends, but then Ava brought up Sunset Manor again. "Did you call them back about the medication issue?" Her voice was clear on the recording. "Yes," Leonard replied, sounding uncomfortable. "They said they could adjust his care plan if he becomes difficult." Ava's laugh made my skin crawl. "Oh, he'll be difficult. Your father has never done what anyone told him to, but they have ways of handling that. I've made sure of it." I felt sick listening to them discuss me like I was a problem to be managed, but I forced myself to keep listening. The more evidence I gathered, the stronger my position would be. By the time I went to bed that night, I had a clear recording of them discussing their plans for Monday, including what they would tell the staff at Sunset Manor about my condition. Thanksgiving morning arrived with a pale, watery sunlight that did little to warm the chill in the air. I was up before dawn preparing the turkey, according to Martha's recipe. Cooking had always been our shared passion, and on days like today I could almost feel her beside me, guiding my hands as I stuffed the bird with her special cornbread dressing. By the time Leonard stumbled downstairs around 8, I had been cooking for hours. The kitchen was filled with the rich smells of roasting turkey, simmering cranberry sauce, and baking pies. "Morning, Dad," he mumbled, heading straight for the coffee pot. "You're up early." "I always get up early for Thanksgiving," I replied, not looking up from the potatoes I was peeling. "Your mother taught me that the secret to a good meal is starting before the sun rises." He winced slightly at the mention of his mother. Martha had been gone for 7 years by then, taken by the same cancer that would eventually claim my wife. But the pain of losing her was still fresh for both of us. I watched Leonard pour his coffee with hands that shook slightly. Was it guilt over what they were planning, or just a hangover? With Leonard, it could be either. He sat at the kitchen counter watching me work. "That's a lot of food for just the 3 of us," he observed. "I like leftovers," I said, mashing the potatoes with more force than necessary. "Besides, your mother always said Thanksgiving was about abundance, about being grateful for what you have while you still have it." Leonard's gaze dropped to his coffee cup. Yeah, he mumbled. Mom always knew what to say about these things. She did, I agreed, adding butter to the potatoes. She also taught me that family is everything. That you stand by the people you love, no matter what. That when someone has given you everything they have, you don't throw them away when they become inconvenient. Leonard's head snapped up, his eyes wide with alarm. Dad, what are you talking about? I smiled at him, the same smile I used to give troublemakers at the mill when I caught them slacking off. Nothing important, son. Just thinking about your mother's wisdom. She always said that how you treat others when they're vulnerable shows your true character. Leonard excused himself quickly, after that nearly knocking over his coffee in his haste to leave the kitchen. I heard his hurried footsteps on the stairs, no doubt rushing to tell Ava that something was wrong. Let him worry. Let them both wonder what I knew. By tonight, there would be no more secrets between us. Ava made her appearance around 11, dressed in an expensive cream-colored sweater and designer jeans, her blonde hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. She looked like she was posing for a Thanksgiving Instagram post rather than helping with a family meal. "Edward, you've been so busy," she exclaimed, surveying the kitchen with wide eyes. "Everything looks wonderful." "I wanted today to be special," I told her, meeting her gaze directly. "I have a feeling it's going to be a day to remember." Something flickered across her face. Uncertainty, maybe even fear, but she quickly recovered, plastering on that fake smile I now recognized all too well. She began fussing with the table settings, rearranging things that didn't need rearranging, filling the silence with nervous chatter about place settings and water glasses. I watched her performance with detached curiosity, marveling at how I'd never seen through it before. Every compliment, every touch on my arm, every "let me help you with that, Edward," all of it calculated to manipulate me, to keep me docile and grateful while they planned to steal my life from under me. While they busied themselves around the house, I made my final preparations. I retrieved the recorder from the living room and downloaded the audio files to my laptop. I organized all the photos I'd taken of their financial records and the forged medical documents into a clear presentation. I found the email with the property deed and saved it where I could access it easily. Then I connected my laptop to the living room television using the wireless system Leonard had installed last Christmas. The meal itself was a masterpiece, though I say it myself. The turkey was golden and juicy, the sides perfectly seasoned, the pies cooling on the counter, filling the house with the scents of cinnamon and nutmeg. We sat down to eat at precisely 2 o'clock, just as Martha and I had always done. I said a brief grace thanking God for food and family, trying not to choke on the irony of those words. Conversation during dinner was strained. Leonard kept giving Ava nervous glances while she dominated the conversation with meaningless stories about people from her office. I responded when necessary, but kept my focus on what was to come. Finally, as we finished the main course, Leonard made an attempt at normalcy. "This is delicious, Dad," he said, cutting into his second helping of turkey. "You really outdid yourself." I wanted to make sure everything was perfect. I replied. After all, this might be our last family dinner for a while. Both of them froze at that, exchanging quick, panicked glances. "What do you mean?" Ava asked carefully. I shrugged, playing innocent. "Oh, just that the holidays are busy. People get caught up in their own lives. Sometimes families drift apart without even realizing it." "That's not going to happen to us," Leonard said quickly. "We're family. We stick together." The irony of those words coming from someone who was planning to abandon me in 48 hours was almost too much to bear. But I kept my expression neutral. "Of course," I said, "family is everything." After dinner, we moved to the living room for coffee and pumpkin pie. This was it. This was the moment I had been building toward all day. "You know," I said, settling into my chair with my coffee, "I've been thinking a lot lately about family memories, about the importance of preserving the truth." Ava and Leonard were sitting on the couch together, both looking increasingly uncomfortable. "The truth?" Ava asked. "Well, yes," I said, reaching for the television remote. "Sometimes people remember things differently than they actually happened. That's why I've started keeping better records of important conversations." Leonard's face went pale. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "I think it's better if I just show you," I said, and clicked on the television. The screen came to life, displaying my laptop desktop. I'd spent hours the night before organizing everything into a clear, devastating presentation. The first thing that appeared was a folder labeled Evidence. "What is this?" Ava demanded, but her voice was already shaking. "This," I said calmly, "is the truth about our family." I clicked on the first file, and the audio from their conversation 2 nights ago began to play through the television speakers. Their own voices filled the room, crystal clear and undeniable. After Thanksgiving, he goes straight to the facility. I've already spoken to Sunset Manor. They have an opening next week. Leonard's coffee cup slipped from his hands and shattered on the hardwood floor. Ava's face drained of all color as she listened to her own voice discussing my behavioral issues and how they planned to drug me into compliance. "Turn it off," she whispered. "Oh, but we're just getting started," I said, and clicked to the next file. This time, it was screenshots of their text messages blown up large enough to read easily on the television screen. Ava's conversations with her sister about getting rid of the old man, her messages with Rick about their affair, and her plans to travel once I was taken care of. Leonard's emails to Sunset Manor lying about my mental state and authorizing them to sedate me if I became difficult. "You can't do this," Ava said, but she was swaying in her seat like she might faint. "Actually, I can," I replied. "It's all perfectly legal. These are recordings made in my own home of conversations about my own life. I have every right to document threats against my well-being." I clicked to the next file. Their bank statements showing how they'd spent my $25,000 down payment on luxuries. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. "Dad, please." Leonard began, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished," I said, and clicked on the final file. This one was a video I'd recorded that morning. Sitting in this very chair, it showed me calm and clearly competent, explaining exactly what Leonard and Ava had planned to do to me. I detailed their lies about my mental state, their plans to steal my pension and Social Security, and their intention to have me drugged in a nursing home. This video, I said, as my recorded image spoke on the screen, along with all the other evidence, has been sent to my lawyer, to the police, and to the State Attorney General's office for elder abuse investigation. That's when Ava finally broke. She let out a strangled cry and pitched forward off the couch, hitting the floor in a dead faint. Leonard scrambled to catch her, but he was too late. I looked down at them both, him kneeling on the floor, trying to revive his unconscious wife, her lying there like a broken doll, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The funny thing is, I said conversationally, as Leonard patted Ava's face, trying to wake her up, I really was planning to go along with whatever you decided. I thought maybe you knew something I didn't about what was best for me. Leonard looked up at me with tears in his eyes. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We can fix this. I shook my head. No, son, some things can't be fixed, but they can be paid for. As Ava began to stir on the floor, moaning softly, I stood up and walked toward my bedroom. I had phone calls to make and arrangements to finalize. The real Thanksgiving feast was about to begin. The silence that followed was deafening. Ava lay on the living room floor, Leonard kneeling beside her with a wet cloth he'd grabbed from the kitchen. She was conscious now, but barely coherent, mumbling something about lawyers and mistakes. Her perfect Thanksgiving outfit was wrinkled and stained with spilled coffee, and her carefully styled hair hung in her face like wet strings. I remained standing by the television, the remote still in my hand, watching them both with the detached calm of someone who had finally stopped pretending everything was fine. Help me get her to the couch, Leonard pleaded. But I didn't move. She'll be fine, I replied. Shock wears off quickly. Trust me, I know. Leonard managed to help Ava sit up against the couch, and slowly her eyes focused on me. The look she gave me was pure hatred, mixed with something I'd never seen from her before. Fear. You have no right, she whispered, her voice raw. Those were private conversations in my house, I replied calmly. About my life, about stealing my money and having me drugged. I'd say I have every right. It's not your house, she snapped, finding her voice. Your name isn't on the deed. I smiled at that. It was the first genuine smile I had felt in months. Actually, Ava, that's where you're wrong. Leonard looked confused. What do you mean? I mean that when I gave you that $25,000 down payment, I didn't just hand you cash and walk away. I went to the closing with you. Remember, I signed papers too. I insisted on being added to the deed as a partial owner proportional to my contribution. The color drained from Leonard's face as he remembered. But the lawyer said exactly what I asked him to say, that it was a family gift. But the legal documents tell a different story. I own 37% of this house, Leonard. You can't sell it without my permission. And you certainly can't kick me out of it. Ava struggled to her feet, swaying slightly. That's impossible. We would have known. You would have known if you'd read the documents instead of just signing wherever Leonard pointed. But you were too excited about getting your hands on my money to pay attention to the details. I walked over to Leonard's home office and returned with a folder I'd retrieved earlier. Inside were copies of all the closing documents with my ownership percentage highlighted in yellow, 37%. I repeated, placing the papers on the coffee table. Plus, since you've been using my pension money to help pay the mortgage for the past 2 years, that percentage has actually increased. My lawyer estimates I now own approximately 42% of this property. Leonard was staring at the papers like they might catch fire. But why didn't you tell us? Because I trusted you, I said simply. I thought we were family. I thought you'd treat me with respect and dignity. I never imagined you'd try to steal from me and warehouse me in a facility. Ava was regaining her composure, and with it her viciousness. You're a manipulative old man. You tricked us. I protected myself, I corrected. Something I learned to do after 43 years in a steel mill, dealing with people who thought they could take advantage of me. She lunged toward the television, trying to grab the remote from my hand. Turn that off. Turn. Delete everything. I held it out of her reach easily. It's too late for that, Ava. Everything's already been uploaded to cloud storage and sent to multiple recipients. Even if you destroyed my laptop, the evidence would still exist. Leonard was reading through the deed documents, his face growing paler with each page. Dad, this changes everything. We didn't know you owned part of the house. It changes nothing, I said firmly. You still planned to steal from me. You still lied to doctors and nursing homes about my mental state. You still conspired to drug me and take control of my finances. The fact that you didn't realize I could fight back doesn't make your crimes any less serious. Ava was pacing now, her hands shaking with rage. Crimes don't be ridiculous. We're your family. We were trying to take care of you. By lying about my mental health, by planning to have me sedated, by stealing my pension, I shook my head. That's not Ava. That's elder abuse, and it's a felony. The weight of that word felony hit them both like a physical blow. Leonard sank into his chair, and Ava stopped pacing. What do you want? Leonard's voice was barely above a whisper. I want my dignity back, I replied. I want my independence back, and I want both of you out of my life. You can't kick us out, Ava protested. Even if you own part of the house, we own the majority. True, I agreed. But I can make your lives very uncomfortable. I can refuse to sign any sale documents if you decide to move. I can demand my share of the equity if you want to refinance. I can invite friends over whenever I want, since this is my home too. I can play my music as loud as I want, cook whatever I want, come and go as I please. I paused, letting that sink in. Or I continued, I can make this very simple for everyone. Leonard looked up hopefully. What do you mean? I mean, I'll sell you my share of the house, fair market value, based on a professional appraisal. You can buy me out and I'll disappear from your lives forever. Ava's eyes narrowed. How much I had already had the house appraised, of course. I'd been busy over the past 24 hours. The current market value is $380,000, My 42% share comes to $159,600. Leonard choked. We don't have that kind of money. Then you'll need to get a loan or sell the house and split the proceeds. Either way, you'll have your freedom and I'll have mine. This is extortion, Ava hissed. No, I said calmly. This is business. You wanted to steal my pension and Social Security to pay for your lifestyle. This way, you get to keep your house, and I get fair compensation for my investment. Everyone wins. Ava was looking desperate now. What about the nursing home? We've already paid the deposit. That's your problem, I replied. You should have asked me before making decisions about my life. Leonard was staring at his hands, finally understanding the full scope of what they'd done. Dad, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I'm ashamed of what we planned. Are you? I asked. Or are you just sorry you got caught? He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. I'm sorry for all of it. I'm sorry I let Ava convince me that this was the right thing to do. I'm sorry I betrayed you. I'm sorry I forgot everything you taught me about integrity and family loyalty. For a moment, I almost softened. This was my son, the boy I'd raised, the young man I'd sacrificed everything for. But then I remembered his voice on that recording, discussing my behavioral issues and agreeing to have me drugged. I appreciate the apology, I said finally, but it doesn't change anything. Trust once broken can't be repaired with words. Ava had been quiet for several minutes, but now she spoke up, her voice cold and calculating. Fine. We'll buy you out, but it will take time to arrange financing. You have 30 days, I said. After that, I start charging rent for my bedroom, and I'll be inviting friends over regularly. Remember, this is my home too. 30 days isn't enough time, Leonard protested. It's more time than you were planning to give me, I pointed out. Monday morning. Remember, pack his things and drive him to Sunset Manor. Leonard winced at his own words being quoted back to him. I've already spoken to a lawyer, I continued. Everything is documented and legal. If you try to force me out or interfere with my daily life in any way, I'll file charges immediately. Elder abuse, financial exploitation, conspiracy to commit fraud. The authorities take these things very seriously these days. Ava was studying me with new eyes, as if seeing me for the first time. You planned all of this. I protected myself. I corrected again. Something you should have expected from a man who survived 67 years in this world. The afternoon sun was setting outside, casting long shadows across the living room. What should have been a peaceful Thanksgiving evening felt more like the aftermath of a war. In a way, I suppose it was. I'll be in my room, I announced, standing up. I suggest you two start making some phone calls. Banks, mortgage companies, whatever it takes. The clock is ticking. As I walked toward the hallway, Ava called after me. You'll regret this, Edward. Family is all you have left. I turned back to look at them both sitting in the wreckage of their schemes and lies. No, Ava, I said quietly. Family is what I thought I had. What I actually had was two people using me until I was no longer useful. The difference is I finally learned to tell them apart. The last thing I heard as I closed my bedroom door was Ava's voice, sharp and angry, berating Leonard for his stupidity and weakness. Their perfect marriage was already showing cracks under pressure. Good. Let them turn on each other. I had my own future to plan. The next 3 weeks passed in an atmosphere of Cold War. Leonard and Ava moved through the house like ghosts, speaking to me only when absolutely necessary, and conducting their frantic phone calls behind closed doors. I could hear fragments of their conversations, desperate calls to banks, heated arguments about credit scores and loan applications, bitter fights about whose fault this whole mess was. I, meanwhile, had never been more productive. I spent my days reorganizing my life with the methodical precision I'd once used to manage mill operations. I opened a new bank account at a different institution and had my pension and Social Security deposited there directly. I hired a moving company to pack up and store Martha's belongings, things I'd been too sentimental to deal with before. I even bought myself a new car, a reliable Honda, that would serve me well in whatever came next. Most importantly, I contacted my old friend Frank, who'd retired from the mill 3 years before me. His wife had passed 6 months ago, and he'd been struggling with loneliness in the big house they'd shared for 42 years. Eddie, he'd said when I called, I was just thinking about you. How's life with the kids? Complicated, I told him. Actually, that's why I'm calling. How would you feel about getting a roommate? By the end of that conversation, Frank and I had worked out an arrangement that would benefit us both. He had a 4-bedroom house with no mortgage and too much space for one person. I had a buyout coming that would let me pay my fair share of utilities and groceries while maintaining my independence. We'd known each other for 30 years, fought side by side through union negotiations and plant closures. We understood each other in ways that didn't require explanation. Leonard and Ava, meanwhile, were discovering just how financially precarious their position really was. Without my pension money helping with the mortgage, they were stretched thin. Leonard's salary as a mid-level manager barely covered their basic expenses, and Ava had never held a steady job in the 3 years they'd been married. The luxurious lifestyle they'd built on my money was crumbling fast. On a gray December morning, exactly 26 days after Thanksgiving, Leonard knocked on my bedroom door. "Dad, can we talk?" I opened the door to find him looking haggard and defeated. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unwashed, and he had the hollow-eyed look of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. "What's on your mind?" I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. "We can't get the loan," he said simply. "Every bank turned us down. Our debt-to-income ratio is too high, and with Ava not working..." He trailed off, staring at the floor. I waited, letting the silence stretch. "The thing is," he continued finally, "we called around to some real estate agents. Even if we sold the house after paying off the existing mortgage and the real estate fees, there wouldn't be enough left to pay you your share." "I see," I said calmly. "And what does Ava think about this development?" Leonard's face twisted with something between pain and embarrassment. "Ava thinks we should fight you in court. Try to prove that the ownership documents were signed under duress or something." And what do you think? He looked up at me with eyes that reminded me of the 16-year-old boy who'd lost his mother all those years ago. I think I've already lost my father, and fighting you in court won't bring him back. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I felt a flicker of the old affection for my son. But it was immediately tempered by the memory of his voice on that recording, casually discussing how to drug me into compliance. "What are you proposing, Leonard?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I was hoping maybe you had some ideas." I studied his face for a long moment. There was genuine remorse there, I thought, but also desperation. Leonard had always been weak-willed, easily influenced by stronger personalities. First by his grief after Martha died, then by his desire to please Ava, now by his fear of losing everything. "I might have a solution," I said finally. "But you're not going to like it." Hope flickered in his eyes. "What is it Ava has to go?" The hope died instantly. "Dad, I can't just—" "She's the problem, Leonard. She's always been the problem. You were a decent man before you married her, and you might be one again after she's gone. But she's my wife. She's a woman who convinced you to betray your own father for money," I said bluntly. "She's a woman who's been cheating on you with someone named Rick while planning to use my pension to pay for her affair." Leonard's face went white. "What are you talking about?" "I have her text messages, remember? She's been seeing this Rick person for months. They have plans to travel together once you got my money under control." "Did you really think she'd stick around?" Once the financial pressure got too intense, I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots I'd saved. Leonard read them in silence, his face cycling through shock pain and finally a cold anger I'd never seen from him before. "She's been planning to leave me," he said quietly. "The moment she got what she wanted, I confirmed. You were just a means to an end, son. A way to get access to my money and this house." Leonard sank into the chair by my window, holding his head in his hands. "I'm such an idiot. You're a man who fell in love with the wrong woman," I said more gently than I'd spoken to him in weeks. "It happens to the best of us. What am I supposed to do now?" "You divorce her," I said simply. "You file for divorce on grounds of adultery. And you use those text messages as evidence. Then you and I work out a new arrangement." Leonard looked up at me suspiciously. "What kind of arrangement?" "I'll forgive the debt in exchange for full ownership of the house," I said. "You can continue living here while you get back on your feet. But the house becomes mine. No more pretending we're equals when I'm the one paying the bills." "And then what?" "Then you decide what kind of man you want to be." "The kind who honors his commitments and treats his family with respect, or the kind who schemes and lies to get what he wants?" Leonard was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the backyard he'd planned to enjoy while I rotted in a nursing home. "She'll fight the divorce," he said finally. "Let her try. I have enough evidence of her adultery and her financial abuse to bury her in court. Plus, she has no income and no assets of her own. What's she going to fight with? What about Rick? What about him?" He's been having an affair with a married woman who was planning to steal from her elderly father-in-law. You think he's going to stick around when this gets messy? Leonard nodded slowly, understanding dawning on his face. You really think she'll just leave? I think Ava is a predator who moves on when her current target stops being profitable, I said. Give her 2 weeks of legal bills and public humiliation, and she'll be gone. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of the front door slamming. Ava was home from whatever shopping expedition she'd been on, probably charging more debt to credit cards they couldn't afford to pay. Leonard, her voice, called from downstairs. Where are you? We need to talk. Leonard and I looked at each other. Now or never, I said quietly. He took a deep breath and stood up. I guess it's time to find out who I really am. As we walked downstairs together, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Respect for my son. Not love, not yet. That would take time to rebuild, if it ever could be. But respect for a man finally ready to face the consequences of his choices. Ava was in the kitchen, surrounded by shopping bags from expensive stores. She looked up as we entered, and I saw her eyes narrow as she took in our unified front. What's going on? She asked, but her voice was already tense with suspicion. Leonard walked over to the kitchen counter and picked up his laptop. I need to show you something, Ava. Len, what are you doing? But she was already backing toward the door, her predator's instincts telling her that the game had changed. I'm showing you some text messages, Leonard said, opening the laptop and turning it toward her. Messages between you and Rick about your plans for after we got control of Dad's money. Ava's face went through the same color changes I'd watched Leonard experience upstairs. Shock, denial, fear, and finally, cold calculation. Those are fake, she said quickly. He's manipulating you, Leonard. Can't you see what he's doing? Are they fake? Leonard asked quietly. Are the messages about leaving me once you got what you wanted fake? Are the plans to travel with Rick? Ava glanced between us, realizing that her usual tactics weren't going to work this time. When she spoke again, her voice was different, harder, more honest than I'd ever heard it. Fine, she said. Yes, I was planning to leave, but can you blame me? Look at this life, Leonard. Look at what we've become, struggling to pay bills, taking care of your decrepit father, stuck in this boring suburban nightmare. So, you decided to steal from him and abandon me. I decided to take what we deserved and start over somewhere better with someone who actually has ambition. Leonard nodded slowly, as if her words were confirming something he'd already known but been afraid to admit. I want you out, he said simply. You can't kick me out. I'm your wife. Not for much longer. Leonard's voice was steady now, resolved. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. Adultery and financial abuse. Dad has evidence of everything. For the first time since I'd known her, Ava looked genuinely afraid. Leonard, please. We can work this out. I'll break it off with Rick. We can go to counseling. It's too late for that. You'll have nothing without me, she said desperately. You'll lose the house. Your credit will be ruined. You'll be stuck taking care of your father until he dies. Leonard looked at her for a long moment, then glanced at me. Maybe, he said, but at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. Ava's desperation turned to fury in an instant. "You're both pathetic," she snarled. "A weak, spineless man and a manipulative old fool. You deserve each other." She stormed out of the kitchen, and we could hear her stomping around upstairs, presumably packing. Leonard and I stood there, in the silence, listening to drawers slamming and closet doors banging. "How do you feel?" I asked him. Terrified, he admitted, but also relieved, like I can finally breathe again. Within 2 hours, Ava was gone. She left with 3 suitcases and a stream of threats about what her lawyer would do to us. She also left behind about $15,000 in credit card debt and a car lease she couldn't afford. But she was gone. That evening, Leonard and I sat in the living room where this had all started a month earlier. The atmosphere was completely different now. Not warm exactly, but honest in a way it had never been before. "I'm sorry," Dad, Leonard said quietly. "I know I keep saying that, but I need you to know. I mean it." "I know you do," I replied. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "Whatever it takes," he said. "However long it takes." I nodded. "We'll see." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. The next morning, Leonard and I drove to a lawyer's office downtown. I had arranged the appointment the day before, anticipating the outcome of his confrontation with Ava. The lawyer, Mrs. Chen, specialized in both elder law and divorce cases. She listened carefully as we explained the situation, her expression remaining professionally neutral despite the increasingly outlandish details. "Let me make sure I understand," she said when we finished. "Your daughter-in-law convinced your son to forge power of attorney documents, falsely claimed you had dementia, and planned to place you in a nursing home against your will while using your pension and Social Security to pay for their lifestyle." "That's correct," I replied, sliding the folder of evidence across her desk. She flipped through the documents, her eyebrows rising incrementally with each page. And now, she's abandoned the marriage, leaving behind substantial debt. "Yes," Leonard confirmed. "I want to file for divorce immediately." Mrs. Chen closed the folder and looked at us both. "Gentlemen, you have enough evidence here for both divorce proceedings and criminal charges of elder abuse and fraud. The question is, what do you want to accomplish?" I glanced at Leonard before answering. "I want to protect myself and my assets. I want to ensure that nothing like this can happen again. And I want my son to have a chance to rebuild his life." "And what about pressing charges?" Mrs. Chen asked. I hesitated. Part of me wanted justice, wanted to see Ava face consequences for what she'd planned to do to me. But another part of me recognized that a lengthy legal battle would only prolong our pain and exposure. "Let's focus on the divorce and protecting my assets for now," I decided. "If Ava contests the divorce or tries to claim part of the house, we can reconsider criminal charges." Mrs. Chen nodded. A pragmatic approach. Now regarding the house ownership. By the time we left the lawyer's office 2 hours later, we had set several plans in motion. Leonard had filed for divorce on grounds of adultery and abandonment, using the text messages as evidence. Mrs. Chen had drawn up new property documents, transferring full ownership of the house to me, with Leonard relinquishing all home claims in exchange for forgiveness of his financial obligations to me. She had also filed for an emergency revocation of the fraudulent power of attorney documents and had started the process of securing my finances against further attempts at exploitation. In the car, on the way home, Leonard was quiet, staring out the window at the winter landscape. "You didn't have to do that," he said finally. Let me stay in the house. You could have thrown me out with her." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "You're my son, Leonard. Despite everything. I won't pretend the last few weeks didn't happen. But I also won't pretend the last 38 years didn't happen either." He was quiet for another moment. "I don't deserve your help." "Probably not." I agreed. "But parenthood isn't about giving children what they deserve. It's about giving them what they need. Right now, you need a chance to get back on your feet and figure out who you are without Ava's influence." "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me yet," I warned him. "Things are going to get harder before they get easier. We have a lot of work to do to untangle this mess." And indeed we did. The next few weeks were a flurry of legal paperwork, financial restructuring, and emotional reckonings. Leonard applied for and secured a job as an assistant manager at a hardware store, a significant step down from his previous corporate position, but the only place willing to hire him quickly. He also took on freelance bookkeeping work in the evenings to start paying down the credit card debt Ava had left behind. I moved forward with my plan to relocate to Frank's house, but agreed to delay the move until after the divorce was finalized. My lawyer advised that my continued presence in the house would strengthen our position if Ava tried to claim it was her primary residence. Ava did fight back briefly. She hired a lawyer who sent threatening letters demanding half the value of the house and a portion of Leonard's future earnings. But when Mrs. Chen responded with our evidence of adultery, financial abuse, and the fraudulent power of attorney documents, along with a counter threat of criminal charges, Ava's resistance crumbled. Her lawyer withdrew from the case, and she signed the divorce papers without further contest. In February, 3 months after that fateful Thanksgiving, the divorce was finalized. Leonard was officially free from Ava, though not from the financial aftermath of their marriage. He was working 60 hours a week between his 2 jobs, slowly chipping away at the debt. He'd sold his golf club membership, downgraded his cell phone plan, and started buying groceries from discount stores instead of the high-end market Ava had insisted on. I watched these changes with a mixture of sadness and cautious hope. Sadness for the dreams that had died, but hope that from their ashes something more genuine might grow. I saw glimmers of the son I'd raised, hard-working, responsible, honest, beginning to re-emerge from beneath the veneer of the man Ava had shaped him into. One evening in late February, Leonard came home from his hardware store job looking particularly exhausted. He sank onto the couch with a groan rubbing his lower back. "Long day?" I asked from my chair across the room. "Inventory," he replied. 8 hours of lifting boxes and counting screws." I nodded, remembering similar days at the mill. The physical exhaustion of honest work. "I met someone today," Leonard said suddenly. "A customer at the store." She needed help finding the right parts to fix her kitchen sink. A woman who knows about plumbing, I observed. That's promising. He smiled faintly. She's a nurse, single mom, 2 teenagers. Her husband died in Afghanistan 5 years ago. She said she's been doing her own home repairs ever since because she can't afford to hire someone. Sounds like a capable woman. She is, Leonard agreed. She figured out the problem with her sink drain herself. Just needed the right parts. We got to talking and, I don't know. She seemed nice. Real, not like Ava. I finished for him. He nodded. She invited me to coffee sometime, to thank me for helping her. I said yes. Good, I said simply. Is it, he asked, looking up at me with uncertainty. Is it too soon? After everything with Ava, I considered this. Maybe. But sometimes the best way to learn about yourself is by seeing your reflection in someone new. Just be honest with her and with yourself. Leonard nodded slowly. Her name is Sarah. I told her about the divorce and about working 2 jobs to pay off debt. I thought she'd lose interest right away, but she didn't. No, he said, sounding surprised even now. She said she respects someone who cleans up their own messes. Smart woman, I observed. Leonard was quiet for a moment. Dad, do you really think I can start over? After everything? I looked at my son, truly looked at him, seeing both the man he'd become and the boy he'd been. Everyone deserves a second chance, Leonard. Even you, especially you. For the first time in months, perhaps even years, I saw genuine hope in his eyes. That night, as I lay in bed thinking about our conversation, I realized something important. In trying to save myself from Leonard and Ava's betrayal, I might have inadvertently saved my son as well. By early March, I was ready to make my move to Frank's house. The divorce was final, the legal issues were resolved, and I was eager to start this new chapter of my life. Frank's home was a comfortable 4-bedroom ranch-style house on a quiet street lined with maple trees, the kind of place where neighbors still brought casseroles when someone was sick and borrowed cups of sugar from each other. Frank met me at the door with a firm handshake that turned into a quick back-slapping hug. About time you got here, he growled, though I could hear the pleasure in his voice. Helen would have had this place spotless 3 weeks ago if she knew you were coming. I'm sure it's fine, I assured him, following him inside. The house was clean, but clearly in need of a woman's touch. Functional furniture, minimal decorations, everything slightly dusty around the edges. But it was warm and solid, like Frank himself. Got your room all set up, he announced, leading me down a hallway. Cleaned out all of Helen's craft supplies, though I kept her sewing machine in case you take up quilting in your old age. The bedroom was larger than the one at Leonard's house, with a window overlooking a well-maintained backyard, fresh sheets on the bed, an empty dresser waiting for my clothes, and a comfortable-looking armchair by the window. It's perfect, I told him, and meant it. We spent the afternoon discussing practical matters, how we'd split expenses, household chores, grocery shopping. Frank was direct and sensible, as he'd always been. No games, no hidden agendas, just 2 old friends figuring out how to make a new arrangement work for both of them. When I got back to Leonard's house, my house now technically to pick up the last of my things, I found him sitting at the kitchen table with paperwork spread out around him. "Working on the finances?" I asked. He nodded, not looking up. "Trying to figure out how to pay off the BMW lease. They want a $3,000 early termination fee." I stood there for a moment watching him. Then I made a decision that surprised even me. "I'll cover that," I said. Leonard's head snapped up. "What? No, Dad. You've done enough already." "It's not a gift," I clarified. "It's a loan, to be repaid when you're back on your feet. But I'd rather see you free of that burden now, so you can move forward. Consider it an investment in your future." "An investment?" Leonard repeated, as if testing the word. "Yes. Because, for the first time in years, I actually believe you have one. The house is yours to use for as long as you need it," I continued, sitting down across from him. "Just pay the utilities and keep it maintained. We'll revisit the ownership issue when things are more stable." Leonard looked stunned. "But it's your house now. The lawyer said." "I know what the lawyer said. But a house is meant to be lived in. I'll be happier at Frank's. He needs the company, and I need the fresh start. Consider it a loan, not a gift. Someday, when you're back in your feet, we can talk about you buying it back from me. For now, just focus on rebuilding your life." Leonard's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you doing this?" "After what I did, because some things are more important than being right," I said simply. "Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning the battle, but in helping the wounded heal." It was something Martha would have said, something she would have done. In that moment, I felt her presence more strongly than I had in years, as if she were standing beside me, her hand on my shoulder, whispering, "That's my Eddie," always finding the high road when everyone else is stuck in the mud. Leonard wiped his eyes, quickly, embarrassed by his emotion. "Thank you," he said. "I won't let you down again." "See that you don't," I replied. "Because second chances are precious things. Not everyone gets them." The next few months passed in a rhythm of rebuilding. Frank and I settled into an easy partnership, dividing household chores according to our strengths. He handled the yard work, I took care of the cooking, and we shared the cleaning. We hosted poker nights for our friends from the mill, went fishing at the lake on Sunday mornings, and spent quiet evenings watching baseball on TV. Leonard, meanwhile, was making progress of his own. He continued working his 2 jobs, but the haunted look was gradually fading from his eyes. He and Sarah were seeing each other regularly, cautiously, respectfully. Nothing like the whirlwind romance he'd had with Ava. She brought her children over for dinner occasionally, and I was struck by how different they were from what I'd expected. Not sullen teenagers, resentful of their mother's new relationship, but quiet, watchful kids who had clearly been through a lot and were wary of being hurt again, much like their mother. In May, about 6 months after that fateful Thanksgiving, I received a letter from Mrs. Chen, the lawyer, who had handled Leonard's divorce. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a brief note explaining that Ava's family had agreed to pay this as a settlement for the fraudulent power of attorney documents. Mrs. Chen had negotiated this payment in exchange for not pursuing criminal charges. It wasn't a fortune, but it was an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and for that, I was grateful. Frank and I decided to use the money to fund a small renovation of his backyard. The wooden deck had been deteriorating for years, and Helen had always wanted to replace it with a proper stone patio. It seemed a fitting tribute to use the settlement money to fulfill her wish. We hired a contractor, chose the stones together, and spent many evenings discussing the design over beers and Frank's famous our grilled cheese sandwiches. The project gave us something to focus on, a tangible way to improve our shared home. Frank's daughter, Emily, visited often during the renovation, bringing her children and staying for dinner. At first, I worried that my presence might make these family gatherings awkward, but Emily welcomed me like an old friend. "Your dad talks about you like you're his long-lost brother," she told me during one visit. "It's good to see him having fun again." One Tuesday morning in July, I received a call from the senior center where I'd started volunteering. The director, a brisk woman named Patricia, asked if I would be willing to speak at an upcoming seminar on elder rights and financial protection. "They've heard about your experience," she explained, "how you stood up to financial exploitation. It could help others recognize the warning signs." I hesitated. Talking publicly about what had happened with Leonard and Ava meant exposing our private struggle to strangers. Yet if my story could help even one person avoid a similar situation, wouldn't it be worth it? "I'll need to think about it," I told Patricia. "And I should talk to my son first. This involves him, too." That evening, I called Leonard and explained the request. I expected resistance, perhaps even anger at the thought of airing our family's dirty laundry. Instead, he surprised me once again. "You should do it, Dad. People need to hear what happened. Both sides of it. How I let myself be manipulated into betraying you, and how you fought back. Maybe it will help other families avoid our mistakes." His maturity and self-awareness continued to astonish me. The man who had once been willing to warehouse me in a nursing home was now encouraging me to share our story to help others. "Are you sure it won't be flattering to you?" "I'm not proud of what I did," he replied, "but I'm trying to be proud of who I'm becoming. Part of that is owning my mistakes." I agreed to give the talk. Over the next few weeks, I prepared my presentation with Frank's help, organizing my thoughts and practicing my delivery. The day of the seminar arrived, and I found myself facing a room of about 30 seniors and their adult children. Some looked interested, others skeptical, a few almost hostile. "My name is Edward," I began. 2 years ago, I thought I had lost everything when my wife Martha passed away from cancer. But I was wrong. I hadn't lost everything then. I was about to lose what little I had left, and it would come from the people I trusted most. For the next 40 minutes, I shared my story. The overheard conversation, the discovery of the fraudulent documents, the confrontation at Thanksgiving dinner. I didn't sugarcoat Leonard's role in the betrayal, but I also emphasized his eventual change of heart and the steps he'd taken to make amends. I explained how I'd protected myself legally and financially, the resources I'd used, and the support systems I'd found. When I finished, the room was silent. Then an elderly woman in the front row raised her hand. My daughter has been trying to get at me to sign my house over to her for months, she said. Says it's for tax purposes. After hearing your story, I think I need a lawyer. Others shared similar concerns: children asking for access to bank accounts, relatives making health decisions without consultation, caregivers who seemed more interested in assets than well-being. Patricia provided resources for legal aid, elder rights organizations, and support groups. By the end of the session, several attendees had approached me privately to thank me for giving them the courage to question arrangements that had made them uncomfortable. Driving home, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. Reliving those painful events had been difficult, but seeing the impact of my story on others gave it new meaning. What had begun as a personal betrayal had become a catalyst for helping others protect themselves. Frank was waiting on the porch when I got home, 2 beers already opened. "How'd it go?" he asked as I sank into the chair beside him. "I think I helped some people today," I replied, taking a long drink, "and maybe prevented a few tragedies. That's something to be proud of, Eddie. Not everyone can turn their pain into purpose like that." His words stayed with me that night, as I lay in bed thinking about purpose. For most of my life, my purpose had been clear: provide for my family, raise my son, build a future with Martha. After her death, I'd lost that sense of direction, allowing myself to be shifted into the role of dependent burden problem to be solved. Fighting back against Leonard and Ava had been about survival, but now, in the aftermath, I was discovering a new purpose. Not just surviving, but thriving. Not just existing, but contributing, using my experience to help others navigate the treacherous waters of aging in a society that often devalued its elders. The next morning, I called Patricia and volunteered to speak at future seminars. I also offered to help establish a peer support group for seniors facing family conflicts or financial exploitation. She accepted enthusiastically, and within weeks I found myself leading a small but growing circle of elders, sharing their stories and strategies. Some, like me, had already faced and overcome betrayals. Others were trying to prevent potential problems. All were determined to maintain their dignity and autonomy as they aged. Leonard attended one of these meetings, sitting quietly in the back of the room, listening to stories that echoed our own. Afterward, he approached one of the participants, an older man who had been in tears, describing his son's attempt to gain control of his finances. I heard Leonard introduce himself as someone who was on the other side of this once, and offer his perspective on what might be motivating the son's behavior and how to approach the conversation differently. Watching my son use his own mistakes to help another family heal their relationship was one of the proudest moments of my life. The circle was completing itself. My stand for dignity was helping Leonard reclaim his integrity. In August, Leonard called me with news that both surprised and delighted me. I asked Sarah to marry me. He said, his voice trembling with a mix of excitement and nervousness, and she said yes. "Congratulations," I told him, genuinely pleased. "When's the wedding?" "We're thinking October. Something small in the backyard." If that's okay with you since it's technically your house. Of course it's okay. The house should see some happiness after everything it's witnessed. There was a pause. Then Leonard asked, "Dad, would you be my best man?" The request caught me off guard. After everything we'd been through, this gesture of reconciliation meant more than he could know. "I'd be honored," I said, my voice rougher than usual. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of preparation. Frank helped me shop for a new suit, and I spent hours crafting a best man speech that honored their relationship without glossing over the difficult path that had led us here. Sarah's children, Michael and Emma, warmed to Leonard gradually, particularly after he started teaching Michael about car maintenance and helped Emma prepare for a math competition. The wedding day dawned clear and cool, a perfect October Saturday. The backyard had been transformed with white chairs, flower arrangements, and strings of lights in the trees. About 50 guests gathered, a mix of Sarah's hospital colleagues, Leonard's friends from the hardware store, and our extended family. Frank sat in the front row, looking uncomfortable but dignified in his rarely worn dress shirt and tie. As Leonard and I stood together waiting for the ceremony to begin, he turned to me with an unexpected question. "Do you think Mom would forgive me for what I almost did to you?" I considered this carefully. "Your mother had the biggest heart of anyone I have ever known," I told him, "but she also had the clearest moral compass. She would have been devastated by your choices. But seeing you now, the man you've become, the husband you're about to be, the father you're preparing to be, yes, I think she would forgive you, just as I have." Leonard's eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them back as the music began, and Sarah appeared at the end of the aisle, radiant, in a simple cream dress, her children beside her. The ceremony was brief and heartfelt. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, I felt a chapter closing in our family story, and a new one beginning. At the reception, I delivered my speech focusing on the theme of second chances and earned trust. I spoke about how true love wasn't just about the easy times, but about how we handle the hardest moments. How Leonard had faced his failures and rebuilt himself into a man worthy of Sarah's love. I welcomed Sarah and her children to our unconventional family, promising to be there for them as they navigated this new chapter together. Later, as the dancing began, Sarah sought me out at my table. "Leonard told me everything," she said, sitting beside me, "about Sunset Manor, about the recordings, about what they plan to do to you. I need you to know that I see him clearly. I'm not blinded by romance or desperation. I know exactly who I am marrying, both the man he was and the man he's becoming." Her directness was refreshing after years of Ava's manipulation. "I appreciate that, Sarah. He's not perfect, but he's trying." "None of us are perfect," she replied with a small smile. "What matters is the trying and the honesty. We're building this marriage on truth, even when it's uncomfortable." "That's a solid foundation," I told her. "Much better than the alternative." As the evening progressed, I found myself watching the interactions between various family members with a sense of wonder. Frank dancing awkwardly with Patricia from the senior center. Sarah's son, Michael, deep in conversation with my poker buddies from the mill. Leonard helping Emma set up a surprise slideshow of photos she'd collected of her mother and new stepfather. These disparate elements of my life, once so separate, were now interweaving into a rich new tapestry. A month after the wedding, Frank and I invited Leonard, Sarah, and the children for Thanksgiving dinner. It would be the first holiday we'd spent together since that fateful confrontation a year ago. Our new stone patio was complete, and despite the November chill, we set up heaters so we could enjoy the new space for cocktails before dinner. As we gathered in Frank's dining room, I looked around at the faces, some familiar, some new, and felt a profound gratitude. This wasn't the family I'd expected to have at this stage of my life. Martha was gone. My relationship with Leonard had been broken and imperfectly mended, and I was living with my old friend instead of in my own home. Yet somehow this patchwork family felt more authentic than what had come before. Frank carved the turkey, and we passed dishes around the table, sharing stories and laughter. When it came time but for the traditional "what I'm thankful for" ritual, I hesitated, overwhelmed by emotion. "I'm thankful for second chances," I said finally, "for the opportunity to rebuild what was broken, for the wisdom to know when to fight and when to forgive, and most of all for the courage to demand dignity, even from those we love most." Leonard raised his glass. "To dignity," he said, "and to truth. Frank never won for sentimentality," added gruffly, "and to good friends who don't mind your snoring." The tension broken. We all laughed and continued our meal. Later, as Sarah and the children helped clear the table, Leonard pulled me aside. "I have something for you," he said, handing me an envelope. "It's not much, but it's a start." Inside was a check for $10,000, the largest payment yet, toward the money he'd taken. "How did you manage this?" I asked, knowing his finances were still tight. "I've been working extra shifts," he explained. "And Sarah and I decided to put off buying new furniture for the living room. This is more important. You trusted me with the house. This is me showing you that your trust isn't misplaced." I started to hand the check back. "Keep it," I told him. "Use it for the kids' college funds, or for that furniture you're putting off." Leonard shook his head firmly. "No, Dad. Some debts have to be paid, not for the creditor's sake, but for the debtor's. I need to make this right for me as much as for you." I understood then that this wasn't really about money. It was about accountability, about Leonard proving to himself, as much as to me, that he was capable of honoring his commitments. I put the check in my pocket. "Thank you, son. This means a lot." That evening, after everyone had gone home and Frank had retired to his room, I sat alone on the patio, wrapped in a blanket against the November chill. The stars were particularly bright, and I found myself talking to Martha, as I often did on quiet nights. "We did it, Marty," I whispered to the sky. "We raised a good man after all. It just took him a little longer to find his way." The cool breeze seemed to ruffle my hair, like her gentle touch. In that moment, I felt a peace I hadn't known since before she fell ill. It wasn't the ending I'd expected when I overheard that conversation on Thanksgiving night a year ago. It was better because sometimes when you finally stop trying to be what other people want you to be, you discover who you really are. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the people who matter most discover it too.